frugal living, household budgeting, minimalism, but all of them are connected with the one single word, budget. Where does the word budget come from? Have a look in some of the old print form dictionaries and some of the modern stuff online, and you'll find that it has its origins in the Middle English word bouge. A bouge was an old leather bag or a pouch. Obviously this is a modern one because it has a zip on it, but something older like a bouge, a leather bag, a pouch or a wallet, and in that we would put the money that we had from our wages on a regular basis. So I've got some coins here. I'm dropping these into my bouge. They are becoming my budget. So there's my little pouch, my bag, and I would carry that around with me in the good old days of hard times and hard labor, and I would create from that my budget within which to cover my basics of food, clothing, and accommodation. In those days, I didn't have transportation because I couldn't afford a horse or a pony or a donkey, so it was food, clothing, and accommodation. Those were the basics. And for most of us, they still are. We might add to that the cost of transportation, and then we have our ability to get to and from work. That might be me buying a ticket for the underground or for the metro system. It might be you buying a car to get you to and from your workplace. But your budget is then comprised of those four things: food, clothing, accommodation, and transportation. Anything else is surplus to our basic needs. We cover our necessities, but we still need then to focus on things like simplifying your accounting methods, building an emergency fund, and avoiding debt or paying down debt and becoming debt-free, getting to the point where you're not controlled by those additional costs over and above food, clothing, accommodation, and transportation, to get to the point where you are in control. I don't know about your situation, but I want to ask you to think about what you learned about money and budgeting as a teenager. Maybe you had pocket money and you could spend whatever you earned, or maybe you had to contribute something to the household. That wasn't my experience. If I earned some money as a newspaper boy with a paper round, or having a job then as a postman and delivering post and getting a weekly wage, my money was by and large mine, unless I wanted, for example, to borrow the car, in which case I had to buy petrol for the car. But the example I think I learnt from my parents and from my grandparents, informally, very much informally, was that if there were three sources of income coming in and there were three sources of expenses, there would be no money left at the end of the month. I have those three units of cost. This is the money that came in from my wage, and there's nothing left over at the end of the month. In a different example, and I learnt this from other families, it might be the case that there were four sources of income coming in and only three units of cost to be paid for in terms of the money that would go out of the household. So in those households, there was a surplus. So if a zero balance budget where your income and your expenses are the same is not what you want, we have to do something else. And the way to do that is to own your budget. Historically, from the influence of family, it may simply be the case that there is an expectation that there will not be a surplus at the end of the month. How do you feel about that? What do you want to create for yourself? From my perspective, if you can take a calculator and design the budget that you want to determine the output that you want to see at the end of each given month, this is a better way forward, because it allows you to say, this is what's important to me. This is how I'd like to achieve my financial goals by the end of the month, by the end of the quarter, and into the year ahead. You can do that by adjusting the different inputs. So on your money coming in, you may have a salary, you may have a couple of different part-time activities, you may have a salary and a side income. Can you do that in such a way that not only are you maintaining your main salary, but you have this additional one or two sources of income, and you use that to achieve the purchase goals, the investment and the saving activity goals that are important to you. Several years ago, I was working in a job as a housing officer in a busy facility with about 30 residents. The issue for me in that particular role, it wasn't a dead-end role by any means. It was a job I really enjoyed and I was really excited to have got hold of, because it meant I could walk to work, and that led to a big financial decision, which was to sell my car. So I was able to get to work in less than 20 minutes on foot and be ready at the time that my working day started. But what I struggled with more than I had expected was that I was the only person on duty in the building looking after the interests of about 30 people. On one occasion, I was in a situation where it was very difficult for me. I felt under great threat and I just couldn't cope with the job anymore. At that point, I finished work, and within 2 weeks, I was off on sick leave and dealing with the stress and the emotional baggage of the incident that took place, and which caused me to be very fearful for my safety. However, on the bright side, I had decided for that year to put aside 10% of my wages, and that I put into a stocks and shares account, and every Friday morning I would buy some shares, and on the Monday I would sell wherever I had made a gain. These, we're talking very small amounts of money, £300, £400 at a time, but I might have made 40 or 50 or £100 sometimes. So each week I was adding not only to the money I had set aside from my wages, but I was also seeing a small profit on some trading activity. It wasn't a technical skill, I don't have that ability, but I just focused on companies that I liked, companies whose products I would regularly buy for food for use in the house. So I would buy pharmaceutical products, food products and clothing items from companies that I liked and I enjoyed. And I also found that those were not creeping into, but naturally coming into some of the 20 shares that I purchased over the course of the year. And I was confident with some small trading and also some dividend income. By the end of the year, the 3,000 or so that I had put aside into the account had grown to £5,000. So by the time I left that particular job through unhappiness, I had a buffer set aside. Something else that I'd been doing alongside my day job in order to boost my savings was buying large amounts of second-hand books. So I might have bought, for example, 50 or 60 of these Penguin books on a given day online, and then listed those as individual books and sold those for a great multiple of the original wholesale cost of the items that I got from one particular seller. And the other activity that I was doing alongside the selling the books and the saving a percentage of my income was renting rooms in the house that I rented. So where I had 5 bedrooms in the property, I rented out 3, had a spare room for me as a study, and also had my own bedroom. But it meant that I was effectively living rent-free, and that boosted my savings, or it boosted my spare cash flow for the year that I held down that particular job. And with those 3, I had different levels of income coming into the house each month, but they were helpful. The smallest was the sales of the second-hand books. Slightly higher than that was the money that I managed to save and also to create a profit from with the buying and selling of small company shares. And then the third one, the largest source of income, was by renting out 3 of the rooms in my home. I've shared this example just to show that it's possible to take your existing situation and raise your income, perhaps in areas which you hadn't considered or thought possible before, but to raise your income and have your costs stay the same. How about if you take a different approach and your income is fixed and you don't go out and seek an additional side income, you don't choose to generate a second small business, perhaps $100 or $200 a week of extra income, and you don't have any spare space to rent out. So those extra sources of income you're not considering. I completely understand that you probably think you're living at the base level and there are no savings to be had. But how about really simple things like your mobile phone contract? Can you switch providers and get a saving of 10 or 20 or 30 pounds a month? Do you have a streaming service that you watch on your laptop or your iPad that again is another 10 or 12 or 20 pounds a month? Are you buying a subscription for a sports package and you've also got a film package with a different provider? These are different ways to save money, but they're tiny. What about the way that you heat your property? What about the way that you pay for gas and electric? Can you save money by switching providers or simply being a little bit more thoughtful around the house? We're only looking to save maybe $100 or $200 here every single month for you to be on a break-even, a zero balance budget. But by cutting your costs by £200 or £300 or £400 a month, all of a sudden that is a surplus that is available to you, not to spend on new frilly, fluffy activities, but instead to accumulate and to save. If you can save $400 or £400 a month, that's a little under $5,000 every single year. It didn't take much, but maybe sitting down, looking at the apps on your phone, looking at some of your bank subscriptions, going through your online or physical paper bank statements and saying, actually, I don't use that, but I'm paying $20, $30 a month. I haven't used that for a year. Why am I paying for it? And going through those processes to cut down on your basic costs. One area where it's really easy to cut our costs is around food and food wastage. It might be that you go to the supermarket once a week and you buy product and you put it in the fridge when you come home, but sometimes stuff goes off before you eat it because you've just put it to the back of the fridge and you haven't thought about it. And these are very petty, small ideas, but they do add up. Another, though, is that you come home from work, you're tired, you're exhausted, you've had a bad day, you want to sit on the sofa, switch on the TV and watch a film. Somebody comes to the house on a motorbike, you pay on your credit card or your debit card, and you've just spent 5 times what it would have cost you to make that food yourself. Change that scenario and see that you are coming in from work, you're tired, you're fed up, you've had a busy day. But instead, you put on some music that you enjoy, you look in the fridge, there is food there that still needs eating, so you make yourself something tasty to eat, you sit down and you watch that same film. Your mood is better, you haven't spent the money, and you can go to bed knowing that you've got money in your bank account that you could have spent on a takeaway, but you didn't. If you're eating out 3 nights a week, can you cut that down this coming week to 1 night a week and save the money that you were going to spend and put that aside into your surplus, into your savings account, into a place that is going to build up a buffer? Talking about a buffer, in this zero-based budget, nobody ever plans for an emergency fund because the idea is that you have the money coming in and it matches the money you're going to spend going out. But nowhere within that is the savings gap budgeted for and thought about. There's no difference to all intents and purposes. This amount equals this amount and there's nothing left over. But this is about making a budget yours, making it something that you craft and create so that it works for you. When I was in that job as a housing officer, it was hard work, it was difficult. At times I felt very stressed and quite alone in the role that I was doing, looking after the people in that building. However, at no point had I expected that there would come a moment when I had to walk away from the job for my own mental well-being, or that the money I had started saving at the beginning of the contract would be my lifeline to walk away from that job and know that I could still pay my bills for the next 3 or 4 months on my house, my food, my utility bills, and everything that I needed. The fact that I also had a buffer from the vintage book sales and from some room rental, that meant that I was completely safe for 6 months without having to think about it. And in those 6 months, I designed what I wanted to have happen over the next year. You will do so much good for yourself by saying, right, I'm going to work out how I can spend $9 for every 10 that I have coming in and put that other dollar to one side. Remember the example of the booze that I shared with you, the little leather bag where you put the money in and you cover your costs. But what about you keep 1/10 of that and you put it to one side and that becomes saving and you pay your bills with everything else that's left in the bouge or the budget. That simple act means that in 10 months' time, you have a month's salary. That might not seem like a lot, but the power of compound interest means that in reality, you will accumulate your savings faster than you think you will. And by starting to put aside something as simple as a little amount of 10%, that gives you the ability to think a little bit more creatively and to come up with other ways of generating income. And what we need to look at is how much freedom you need, what you want to create, and what you want your life to look like as you go forward with a budget that is not boring, that is not restrictive, but something that is instead motivational for you. At the beginning of this year, I sat down for one evening and spent 2 hours with my laptop, and I created a spreadsheet. A spreadsheet is not a lifeless, boring, uninteresting piece of software that you produce on your laptop or your desktop PC. It's something that is a route map to get you from the place where you are right now to take you on a journey to the place where you think you'd like to be 3 months or 6 months or 9 months in the future, and to give you clues and insights into where you may have unexpected spending and you spot it because of gaps in your spreadsheet. It shows you where you may have income sources that you hadn't considered but which you could create over the next 3 or 6 months so that next year you can enjoy an income from something that right now that doesn't exist. The spreadsheet for me is a good way of taking my ideas, dropping them onto screen and producing something, like I've said, in just a couple of hours that can be a useful guide for going forward. On the other hand, I will use pen and paper. This is a particular Moleskine book, and I use it to put down some notes and ideas about particular stocks and things that I'm attracted to. None of this is rocket science. It's about being thoughtful and considerate of what those particular risks and rewards might be, and just putting something aside every month into a vehicle like that, so that you have a way of creating first the emergency fund, which might be between $1,000 and $5,000, but then it becomes a regular and a consistent place where you put your savings, and you throw a few £1,000s at clearing a credit card, then you throw another few £1,000s or dollars at clearing a vehicle loan, you throw more at a personal loan that you borrowed from the bank several years ago. Maybe you have student debt, but every month you throw money at that. It always comes down to the fact that the whole idea of the budget is that it has to be yours. A budget is not something imposed on you by your grandparents' ideas. It's not something you have to sign up for because your bank manager says you need a budget. Listen, we all need a way of tracking our income and our household expenses, whether you do that on a post-it note or in a larger format booklet, or whether you do that on a spreadsheet. It doesn't matter. This is your budget, and it's about how you do the things that work for you. Don't let anybody else tell you you have to do it a certain way. You get to go through your expenses and think, okay, what can I cut? What can I reduce? What can I get rid of completely? But you also get to look at, where can I grow my income? How can I grow my income? What can I do to set aside money on a regular basis from my earnings so that I have some future protection against future costs when I don't have any earnings, or when I have my overtime taken away from me and I need to have that buffer to allow me extra time to either find additional income or to find a completely new job. It might be that you want to change cities. It might be that you want to simply change the neighborhood within the area where you live. Having a buffer will do that. Developing extra income will give you that freedom and that choice, and also that opportunity that comes to you from knowing there is an extra bag of money in the background that gives you that freedom and allows you to make better quality decisions for your own life and for the things that are important to you and in line with the values which motivate and drive you and your family and your household to leading a life that is important and meaningful, but which allows you to be happy and content, not just with what you've got, but with how you use and allocate those financial resources on a regular basis. What you want your budget to be is something that motivates you and excites you.